Starlink satellites captured Starship in orbit, giving engineers direct visual data on upper stage behavior after deployment. This is SpaceX Daily, episode 54. Over the past week, Starship Flight 13 completed a clean ascent and water landing, followed by extended floating recovery operations in the Indian Ocean. Regulators continued reviewing expanded flight corridors and landing zones. SpaceX secured another major Pentagon contract supporting military satellite missions. Those threads now feed directly into the new orbital imagery and upcoming earnings discussion. SpaceX released new footage of Starship in space captured by the Starlink satellites it deployed. The satellites recorded the upper stage after separation, showing its post-deployment orientation and thermal state. This marks the first public orbital imagery of a Starship vehicle captured by its own payload. Engineers can now compare the observed attitude and surface conditions against pre-flight models. The data directly informs heat shield performance expectations for future re-entries. Observers on X noted the Starlink captured Starship footage provides the clearest orbital view yet of the upper stage thermal protection system after payload release. Multiple accounts highlighted visible tile patterns and attitude stability in the released clips. Engineers compared the imagery to prior ground test data for alignment. SpaceX will release second quarter results after market close on August 4th, the first earnings report since the June IPO. Management will host an audio webcast streamed on X at 4:30 p.m. ET, with no dial-in line. The filing covers Starlink subscriber metrics, launch cadence, and Starship development spending. Reports indicate the presentation will include updates on Falcon operations alongside Starship progress. The debut earnings call follows the record IPO completed on June 12th. A spent Falcon upper stage is projected to impact the lunar surface at high velocity later this week. Trajectory models place the impact site on the far side. The event follows the stage's departure from Earth orbit after a prior mission. Analysts note the stage retained enough residual velocity to reach the moon without further propulsion. No active control remains on the discarded hardware. Community members tracked the projected lunar impact of the discarded Falcon stage and compared it to prior uncontrolled re-entries. Discussions focused on the far side impact geometry and expected velocity. Some users modeled similar past events for context. SpaceX reached an agreement to retire temporary gas turbines powering the Colossus site by the end of 2027. The turbines currently supplement grid supply during construction. Permanent grid connections and on-site generation are scheduled to replace them. The deal addresses local concerns over emissions from the interim power setup. Construction timelines for the main facility remain unchanged. Engineers on X highlighted the 2027 turbine removal deadline at Colossus as a test case for scaling grid-tied AI clusters without temporary generation. Posts examined the transition timeline and grid upgrade requirements. Snowflake joined the Cursor Enterprise program alongside AWS, BCG, Databricks, McKinsey, and NVIDIA. The partnership supplies reference architectures for deploying AI coding tools inside large organizations. Supermicro and Dell are listed as hardware partners shipping compatible systems. The program focuses on governance controls and context management for enterprise code bases. Early deployments emphasize integration with existing data platforms. Cursor users shared early enterprise deployment patterns after Snowflake's program announcement, focusing on governance controls for large code bases. Participants described workflow changes when routing tasks between models. Several noted hardware partner compatibility details from the rollout. Worth keeping an eye on, Starship Launch 13 analysis points to a persistent thermal protection vulnerability on the upper stage that survived the flight but remains unaddressed for repeated high-energy entries. The article argues the current tile layout and attachment method create single-point failure modes under lunar return heating profiles. Resolving the issue would require either redesigned tiles or a different attachment architecture before crewed or high-cadence missions. Independent reviewers noted that ground test data alone may not capture all orbital variables observed in the recent flight. On the AI front, Snowflake's entry into the Cursor Enterprise program adds a major data platform partner for AI-assisted coding workflows inside large organizations. The move expands reference architectures that combine Snowflake data tools with Cursor agents. Hardware partners including Supermicro and Dell are positioned to support scaled deployments. SpaceX committed to retiring the temporary gas turbines at the Colossus site by 2027, shifting the cluster to permanent grid and generation capacity. The agreement sets a firm deadline for replacing interim power sources during ongoing construction. Local stakeholders are monitoring the transition for emissions and reliability impacts. From an engineering standpoint, the Starlink satellite's footage of Starship after deployment offers a rare external view of the upper stage in its post-separation thermal and attitude state. The upper stage must survive the transition from vacuum exposure to re-entry heating while carrying residual propellant and avionics. Any unexpected rotation or surface anomaly visible from the satellites directly tests the assumptions baked into the tile attachment and active control design. The imagery therefore functions as an in situ sensor array that bypasses the limitations of ground-based or chase plane observation. If the observed tile gaps or surface temperatures match pre-flight predictions, the data lowers the uncertainty margin on the heat load model and supports scaling the same attachment scheme to higher energy lunar return trajectories. Conversely, any deviation would quantify how much additional margin or redesign is required before the idiot index, the ratio of finished thermal protection cost to raw tile material and attachment labor, can be driven down through reuse. The footage also reveals attitude control propellant usage after payload release, a parameter that affects both mass fraction and the feasibility of rapid turnaround between flights. The next engineering step is to correlate these orbital images with telemetry from the same flight and with upcoming static fire or re-entry test data. That correlation will decide whether the current tile layout moves the program closer to rapid upper stage reuse or whether a different attachment architecture must be introduced before Block 3 vehicles fly. Engineers will also examine whether the captured thermal gradients align with finite element models used for tile bond qualification, providing a direct check on manufacturing tolerances. Finally, the dataset allows comparison against earlier suborbital flights where only internal sensors were available, tightening the validation loop for future vehicles. A quick note on the market. SPCX closed at $108.37, down 3.9% ahead of the August 4th earnings release. Before we go, watch for how the new orbital imagery correlates with telemetry ahead of the earnings discussion on Starship spending. That covers everything worth knowing about SpaceX today. SPCX is trading at $108.37, down 3.9%. A quick rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify goes a long way. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you tomorrow. This show comes to you from the NIDA network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, OmniView has you covered. A balanced daily world news briefing that takes every side seriously. All our shows are free at naranetwork.com. New to the network, naranetwork.com. Start here picks the right daily briefing for you in about 2 minutes. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.